Hey guys, Rachelle Kroon here, and today we're going straight to Queensland, the state that everyone's talking about. I've got one of Queensland's sharpest buyer's agents with me today, who's on the ground every day. We're going to cover things like why everyone's talking about moving to the Sunshine Coast, regional gems, some hotspots, and some things to avoid. So if you want to know what's happening on the ground in the Sunshine State, this episode is for you. Let's dive into This Is Property. Luke Aldridge, buyer's agent from Envisage. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Now, before we dive right into all things Queensland, tell us a little bit about you. How long have you been a buyer's agent for, and how did you get into it?
Quick version, I suppose. Been doing buyer's agency for the last 5 years, working with John for that period at Envisage Property. A bit of a long story, but so originally when I was in my final few years of school, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I was probably actually leaning towards the engineering path. That's just sort of how my brain worked, numbers, visually seeing sorts of things. And got to the end of schooling, and during that period, that last sort of year 11 and 12, it's actually my mother who was starting to get investing herself into property. And so she was constantly attending. Back then, they used to do property seminars at hotels and conference centres, that sort of thing. And so I used to occasionally tag along, a bit of a trip. We lived on the far north coast of New South Wales, and so these things were generally on the Gold Coast or Brisbane, and so I'd tag along for a trip up the coast. Usually I'd just bail and I'd be wandering around the beaches, having a bit of a look around, but eventually I sort of wondered what was going on inside, and so dragged myself in there and sat there and sort of got hooked, got a bit of a bug for investing and everything that I was sort of teaching back then. And so that was sort of the first inkling that led me into this sort of world. Skip forward a bit, finished school, decided I wanted to have a bit of a gap year actually, and so I wasn't going to jump straight into university. Thought, what's a good way to earn a good bit of money so that I can sort of set myself up for university or traveling if that's what I wanted to do. And thought mining back then actually was, obviously still is, very high income. And so I was able to secure a job within a matter of sort of a month in mining. So a month out of school, I was straight into the mining. Definitely a left hook from where I thought I was going to end up. But started doing that. And again, my plan was just 12 months of mining, earn some good money, and then jump into university. Well, 12 months later, I'd earned a lot of money. I was looking at a lot of my mates that were at university struggling, and sort of thought to myself, well, I didn't have a passion for engineering. And so I don't know if I wanted to leave this high paying job and jump into university. Sort of felt like almost taking a step back. So I just said, no, I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and sort of hopefully something will come ahead in the years to come, and I'll sort of jump out then. Not long after that, though, I've been saving. Luckily, I'm a saver at heart, so I'd been saving a lot of money, and a property opportunity come to me, and I thought, yep, low risk. I had not much responsibilities at the time, so jumped straight in. So I think I was just turned 19 and purchased first property, an investment property as well, and I said pretty simple, low risk, jump straight into it, and sort of again that sort of just itched that scratch of investing for me, and then sort of kept working, kept saving money. 12 months later, another opportunity come my way, purchased that property as well. So I had 2 properties within sort of 3 years of leaving school, and that was from then I sort of went, well, I'm buying these properties, not really doing too much education on myself, and I had plenty of time. Obviously working FIFO, you've got weeks on end where you're at home or on planes till I could be studying. So long story short, just started reading everything I could, watching anything and everything. Back then, unfortunately, there wasn't many podcasts like this that could educate me. Attended conferences myself, started flying all over Australia, going to property gurus and watching they're doing their conferences, trying to just pick up little pieces here and there of different strategies that they use. And so, again, skip forward about 10, 15 years, had a number of properties under my belt by then. I actually found my beautiful wife, got a couple of kids, and thought, right, time to get out of the mines and settle back home. What do I want to do? Again, my only passion at the time was property. Each weekend, I generally find myself going to open homes, going to auctions, even if I wasn't buying properties at the time, was just attending it and just keeping that passion alive. So yeah, again, my head just went, okay, this is the perfect opportunity to jump into real estate. Done all the courses I need to, and was probably actually thinking, because I didn't actually know what a buyer's agent was even back in 5 years ago. It still wasn't very popular in Queensland. I know down south it was sort of a bigger thing, but yeah, definitely in Queensland it wasn't. So right at that time, this is probably right at the start of COVID as well. John started advertising for a buyer's agent, and yeah, one thing led to another, and here I am at Envisage 5 years later.
That is amazing. So you just followed your passion.
Pretty much, yeah. I was very fortunate to having worked that time in the mines and set myself up that I could actually find a job that I was passionate about when I come home, and wasn't sort of reliant on just getting any job that I had to. And so yeah, definitely jumped into a passion job, and yeah, it's great going to work every day and actually really enjoying what you're doing, and it helps. I think that rubs off onto clients and colleagues as well. That there's a lot of passion that comes out of me when I'm talking to them, and so yeah, it's a win-win.
100%. I bet you don't regret that mining income to build your property portfolio, though.
It definitely helps. Yeah. Yeah. Didn't even have to do the equity purchases for properties when I was accumulating them. It was just save, buy, save, buy. Which, yeah, again, put me in good stead in the years to come.
Yeah, amazing. So you've been on the ground in Queensland for 5 years now as a buyer's
Correct.
agent, and in Queensland specifically, it's a huge amount of change. I would say more than most states in the last 5 years. As someone who's on the ground every day buying property, what have you seen in that 5 years that you've been here?
Yeah, correct. I think it was COVID was definitely the compounding factor, but Queensland sort of throughout 2000s to all the way, sort of around almost 2020, it'd been a pretty steady market, 3 to 4% growth, really not much happening. All the media is always Melbourne and Sydney. And so if you're an investor in either of those states or any other state, that's obviously where you would head. But yeah, once COVID happened, people sort of realised that those maybe the Melbourne and Sydney markets were a bit inflated, or they just couldn't get into those markets anymore. And then all of a sudden you look at the third biggest capital, Brisbane, you could still back then buy a house, 600,000 sort of in and around the city, and it was a no-brainer. And unfortunately, we get good yields as well, rental yields up here. So it's a double whammy for investors that you could buy a property at a good price and getting good rental yields for that 4 to 4.5%. So you're more or less not having to pay out of pocket too much per month. Sort of in the last 5 years, though, that the prices have jumped in most areas. It's well over 100% growth in that period, which is insane.
That is insane.
Yeah. So if you jump in early, you're very happy. But I think now it's not like we've gone over where the value is. We're more along par with sort of where sort of some Sydney and Melbourne areas are, not so much the CBDs of those two areas. But the $1 million median house price is sort of common in most areas in and around Brisbane, sort of the southeast as well, Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast. That's sort of been the median price these days.
Yeah, that's right. So I've been talking to a lot of clients and sharing their property journey on this podcast, and a lot of them have had huge growth in places like the Sunshine Coast in that last 5 years. Moreton, Newport, all of that Moreton Bay area in that southeast. So what if things have gone up 100% in the last 5 years? I guess, what do you think led to that? What do you think the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast had that just boomed in that time?
Population growth was a main factor. Again, especially during COVID, a lot of people were heading in this direction. We're just not enough supply and demand. It always comes down to that. So population growth, projections next 20 years, to meet in the southeast corner of Queensland, to meet the projected growth, they need to be building about 10,000 homes a year for the next 20 years. And at the moment, so the last 12 months, they only built 2,200. So they're not even close to meeting their mark. And that sort of gap is just going to compound year after year of not meeting the mark. And there's, to be honest, there's not a lot I'm seeing from the government that is going to really boost that sort of building and construction industry. So yeah, the demand is it's going to keep increasing, and supply is dwindling. So that's a big factor. Obviously, yeah, the affordable prices for a lot of people, especially if they are from other states and are using equity from a principal place, maybe down in Sydney and Melbourne. It's very affordable up here. And I mean, a lot of the weather. It's good work, great weather. 9 months a year, it's 25 and sunny. Your proximity to Brisbane, there's always the talk of the Olympics coming up. I'm not sure that's more media talk than actually going to affect the market, but where the governments are doing the right thing is they're putting a lot of money into infrastructure as well. So setting up for the future, I think that's going to help long term. And a lot of investors see that and go, okay, well, it ticks all the boxes. The data's good. There's going to be infrastructure. It's a great place to live. So yeah, why not buy there now?
So your main clients are investors?
Predominantly, yeah. We get the occasional owner rock. I suppose at the moment, when the owner rocks come along, it's normally they've been searching themselves for 6 to 12 months, like most buyers do. They want to buy it themselves. They want to walk through the properties and get that feel and fall in love with it. But they sort of tend to find themselves that they've been missing out constantly. Prices continue to go up, and then sort of gone, well, look, we're going to have to get sort of professional help to help try and get us a foot in there and purchase something. But yeah, predominantly investors, generally only 1 or 2 properties under their belt at the time, or this might be their first. And again, so they might be living, so it's that sort of rent investor feel to it. They live in Melbourne, Sydney, or anywhere else around the country, to be honest, and happy with those locations, want to get their property under their belt. And so, yeah, Queensland being the affordable market, that's where they're sort of being directed.
Yeah, and I guess affordable market is the key word. So would you say that you would say most investors would now consider the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast to be affordable markets?
Borderline, yeah. I mean, if you have the serviceability, it's still a very great place to purchase because the growth is still there. It has the sort of the double factor of there's not a lot of vacant land left in both locations. So this again, with that population growing, most people when they moved interstate head to the southeast Queensland. So it's either your Brisbane, your Sunshine Coast, or your Gold Coast. And I think actually looking at some data, Queensland and WA were the only 2 states in the last 12 months that had a positive net interstate migration, meaning more people moved to the state rather than left. So we're still getting a lot of immigration from that way. And yeah, again, most people only know those sort of main capitals of the southeast Queensland, so they head there. After a few years, they might move to different locations in and around Queensland. But yeah, I suppose if you do have that sort of $1 million price range, those are still great locations. You're within anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to some of the best beaches in Australia. Great weather again. And yeah, as I said, land supply is not good, so there's not going to be huge, massive developments. It's not going to be another 10, 20,000 homes built in the next decade, which is sort of something going to impact price growth as well.
100%. And I hadn't spent a lot of time in places like the Sunshine Coast. I sort of had Brisbane, Gold Coast, but I went to the Sunshine Coast maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I can see what all the fuss is about. That's a pretty cool lifestyle.
It's beautiful. It's a bit more relaxed than say Gold Coast, but becoming very popular again because you haven't quite got the traffic and some of the other issues that we have down south. But yeah, again, the beaches there, all your infrastructure, a lot of business, a lot of work. The Gold Coast hospital, sorry, not the Gold Coast, the Queensland government have built a new hospital up there in the last decade, so thousands of jobs flowing in for professionals in the area. And again, it's got its own airport that's going to slowly be growing, I think, in the years to come, and will you'll be able to fly to to the Sunshine Coast direct from anywhere around the country, which will again boost I think property prices, because you don't have to go to Brisbane and then head up north. Again, it's only an hour to an hour and a half away from Brisbane at the end of the day. So we still do see a lot of people living in the Sunshine Coast and then just travelling 1 or 2 days a week to Brisbane, if that's if their work schedule allows it, which is more or less common these days.
So from the Sunshine Coast, if you were working in Brisbane, so it's a 1.5 hour commute?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I mean, obviously traffic depending some days, but yeah, a good run is an hour to an hour and a half.
Yeah, I think so many people have got different alternatives now than going to the office 5 days a week, don't they?
Yeah, a lot of clients that we get, we do see that the flexibility that companies allow these days is great. And so, they do have the ability to work at home for a couple of days and then work in the office for a couple of days. And so, yeah, why wouldn't you want to live 10 minutes from the beach, and you put up with that drive, twice a week? It's not that bad.
So even though it's had all that growth in the last 5 years, you still think there's plenty of room in those kind of Brisbane, Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast markets?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're still seeing us. I mean, just from a client's perspective, I looked the other day, purchased a property for a client, and they had 25% growth in the last 12 months. So on their property, and that was over $1 million, that purchase. So yeah, definitely still plenty of growth there. I mean, yeah, I try and always compare it to, if you look on the northern suburbs of Sydney, that might be an hour drive north from Sydney. Those sort of price points are still multi-million dollars. So I can only foresee that with population growth and the way things are moving in the future for Queensland, that Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast are going to be still a similar price ranges coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess keeping those price ranges in mind, and I know that like $1 million is probably not where a lot of first time investors are sitting, and
Yeah,
some
correct.
do. I'm not certainly not generalizing, but Queensland was a place a few years ago where people went from Sydney when they were looking for something that was more affordable. So, if somebody wasn't looking in that $1 million price point, if somebody had less to spend and they're going further out, what are some of the, I guess, the regional gems that people would think about if they have a different price point that they're comfortable with?
Yeah, I think I do see a lot of people that I talk to from other states, don't quite realise the size of Queensland, and more or less the fact that Brisbane is right in the bottom corner of the state, right near the border. And so when I try to explain to them sometimes that for instance, driving from Brisbane to Cairns, for instance, is 1,700 kilometres, and it's the same distance as driving from Brisbane to Melbourne. Brisbane and Melbourne is 1,775 kilometres, I think, from memory. So it's pretty much the same time. So I could, for instance, again, I could drive from Brisbane to Sydney back to Brisbane quicker than I can drive to Brisbane to Cairns. It is that vast, the state, and so yeah, everyone sort of focuses in this corner, but there is plenty of other great locations to go. Sort of in between, obviously Townsville and Cairns are the big major centres up in the far north Queensland. Even in between that, though, you got Bundaberg, Gladstone, Rockhampton, Mackay. These are all sort of towns in between that. I think back in the day, the mining is a big factor for those towns, and it did used to see a lot of big growth during the mining boom, and then a big drop off. And so there was a lot of risks for investors back in the day that when things are great, you're getting a lot of property growth, and your rental yields were insane because there wasn't enough properties for all the mining companies to fill out. But then you might have a down patch of 5 to 8 years when the mining industry declined, and so you're really struggling, and so people being forced to sell when they don't want to sell, and not a great investment strategy. I think these days, credit to local governments and governments as well, and even the mining companies, when they get awarded contracts in these areas, they usually have to have a percentage of locals working for the companies, and so that forces people to either move into the towns or be hired from the towns, and so you don't really see the peaks and troughs in those areas that you used to, which again is great for investors because I mean for all those sort of towns, the median house price is still between 6 to 700,000, so very affordable. Your rental yields are still more or less close to that 4.5%. Supply is still a huge issue. Vacancy rates are like 0.2%, which is crazy. More or less means as
Yeah.
soon as if as soon as you put a place on, online to advertise for rent, within a week, it's more or less rented. So it ticks all the boxes for investors, and you haven't got that huge downside of potentially a mining decrease, or sort of the mining industry going into a negative and impacting your house prices. And I think even with all the population growth in the southeast Queensland, a lot of people are just generally moving further north to get out of the traffic, get out of the hustle and bustle of that area. And they're finding these locations again. All these locations are within an hour of the beach, within the coastline. The untouched is there's no one along the coastline up that way. Again, it's a great lifestyle in these areas.
Yeah, I was speaking to somebody the other day who said they had to move out of Brisbane and they were very unhappy about it. They couldn't afford right in Brisbane. It was to live in, but
Yep.
it was a 30-minute drive from Brisbane and they thought it was horrendous. And it's just funny because in Sydney, a 30-minute drive is nothing to sneeze at. It's just, you still consider to be in the city if you're taking 30 minutes to get to work. So is it different in Brisbane? I mean, what's the acceptable, I guess, distance where people call it the city to get to work in a commutable way?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're definitely not calibrated to the way Sydney and Melbourne are. Um, I would say anyone sort of 30 to 40 minutes. Is that I don't know. It's tricky because if you live
Not
on
everyone works in Brisbane, but I'm just thinking, like, you always do that. How long is it actually from Brisbane when I'm talking about these towns?
okay. So if for instance, if you're looking at Ipswich is another sort of booming area and gets talked about a lot. It almost feels like its own city in itself these days. It's that big. At the end of the day, it's 40 kilometres to the CBD of Brisbane. So, in peak hour traffic, it might be an hour, but any other time throughout the day, it's 45 minutes. And so,
Yeah, I have
and
seen
again,
some crazy prices in Ipswich over the last few years.
I think a lot of people, again, from other states see those sort of distances and times and go, well, that's more like an outer suburb of, maybe Sydney or something. It's not even that far away, but it's got a lot of growth. Again, Toowoomba, another great location, gets talked about a lot. It's a country town. It has very much a country feel, very quiet, peaceful. You can drive from one side to the other side of Toowoomba within sort of 15, 20 minutes. And again, that's only an hour and a half to Brisbane as well. So even though it feels like it's 3 hours away, or you think about it and people go, oh, it's hours and hours away from anything. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's only an hour and a half to Brisbane. So again, a lot of people I know still do that drive once or twice a week to where they might work in the city, but they live in Toowoomba. Toowoomba.
This is going to be embarrassing because I've been to Toowoomba many times, but I've never driven between Brisbane and Toowoomba. And in my mind, it was hours and hours.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it feels like I drive it all weekly almost. And it's there's a lot of vacant land. It's very much country. There's paddocks and stuff in between it. So it's a beautiful drive. You go through the Lockyer Valley, and again, it feels like it's so far away. But then when you actually look at the time, unless again at peak hours you come into the city, it does increase. But again, you've got public transport. There are train lines and stuff these days that you can jump on, and so you're not even driving. You're just sitting on a train, doing a bit of work, reading books, listening to podcasts, and so it's even better.
So is that something people look at with the train lines?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And again, it's that sort of stuff is growing. I know there's the inland rail is being proposed by, I think, a couple of state governments, federal governments at the moment. That's potentially going to join up Brisbane all the way to Melbourne. And obviously, it's using some of the current tracks and some of the new tracks. That's actually going, I think, 2 stops is going to be in Ipswich on the way into the city. There are already currently train lines as well that head out, and there's a lot of satellite, I call them satellite towns, in between Brisbane and Toowoomba that are just small, and you go, oh, they don't have the population that you might like as an investor, but they have the train line that goes straight into the city, and you're out sort of, you can have a 1,000 square metre block, 2,000 square metre block, beautiful brick house, 4-bed, 2 baths. And at a reasonable price, still at around 600-700K. So a lot of the young families definitely prefer that than living sort of in the city, stuck in a hustle and bustle.
Yeah, and I mean, really, 600 to 700,000 is still a really common price that either a first-time investor or a first home buyer is looking to get into the market at. Where are they buying at that level? If you're thinking in between 6 and 700,000.
Yeah, I think these days that's sort of where we do mostly see them heading is you're heading sort of inland. So Ipswich is still in that price range. I mean, you can still get suburbs which are under that, which is a bonus. You just have to be, make sure you're in the right location, so you're away from, floods, fire. You're within good locations to shopping centres, all those sorts of things. Arterial roads into public transport if you need to be catching public transport regularly. So that, price points there are still very achievable. As I said, you've got Toowoomba. There's other regional towns in and around. Warwick is another one that's, again, they still have multiple industries that boost the town's profile to make sure that they don't have peaks and troughs in their property growth. But a very, I think the median price down there is still under 600, 700,000. So it's more around the sixes. Again, even further north of Sunshine Coast, you can get up to Gympie. That's still in the 600Ks. You can still buy, good quality property. And I think that's only an hour north of Noosa or under that. And so everyone knows Noosa has been sort of the go-to spot for holidays and whatnot, because it's right on the coast, beautiful little town. You can be 45 minutes to an hour away from that for 600, 700K.
Yeah, wow. And so were you talking about investors, and just specifically investors, and specifically talking about if somebody was going to go more regionally to, I guess, for a certain price point, they didn't want to buy a unit, they wanted to get a house and land for some reason. You spoke about Toowoomba and Ipswich. Can we dive into a little bit about those two and just give us a little bit of, I guess, what you'd be looking for in those sorts of areas? Why would an investor invest there? And I guess they've both grown a lot recently. What's in place to make you think that they might have a little bit more in them?
Yeah. Let's start
Or
with Ipswich.
plan,
Sorry?
or a long-term plan in them.
Long term. Yeah, I think, again, with Ipswich, if you look back and saw the, past 5 years, the growth in that area has been literally between 110 to 140,000, percent, 100 in some areas. So if you look at that and if you look from other states and you go, this area in the last 5 years has grown almost 150%. It hasn't reached its peak, but to be honest, back then the house prices were 300 to 400,000 in some areas, and so really it's only gone to 600,000 or 700,000, and so it's very affordable still. In the last, I think, 12 months, they're still seeing double-digit growth, 13, 14%. So it's not like it's slowing down. Again, I've talked about the proximity to Brisbane for Ipswich just before. There's a lot of infrastructure in regards to arterial roads to and from different suburbs to get them straight to public transport, so that you can get you can be anywhere within the city to a train line within sort of 10 minutes. So you can live on the other side of Ipswich, or you can wherever you want, and still get the train line 10 minutes and then shoot into the city, and you'll be in the city within an hour. Even sort of some of the major projects in and around Brisbane at the moment, which are to support Brisbane's growth, they're going to impact Ipswich as well. Like there's the Cross River Rail, which most people haven't really understood yet. But in Brisbane at the moment,
I don't understand the Cross River Rail.
Yeah, so it's pretty much the biggest infrastructure project going on at the moment. So currently, if you catch a train into Brisbane, anywhere from the southern end, or like from the Gold Coast, anywhere south of Brisbane, there's only one train line or like rail bridge that goes into the city. So all that traffic, all those trains have to converge and then time their trip into the city to go to Central Station, which is crazy with all that population down south. So what they're doing, they're building a second line now. So there's going to be two routes into the city. So it's going to free up a lot of the trains, and so they can put more trains on, be more regularly rather than once every half an hour. In some locations, you can have a train line every 10 minutes heading into the city. So that's a big one. That's going to free up. They're adding I think half a dozen stops as well. That are new train lines, new train stops, which is going to be part of the infrastructure. But the big factor is going to be the second line into the city. So again, it's going to mean that you can live anywhere and not be sort of reliant on a half an hour window between trains heading into the city. What else is there? I mean, even the metro upgrade in the city, again, it doesn't sound like it's going to impact, but it's adding additional train stops underground. It's adding extra lines in and around. So again, you don't have to rely on getting to Central and then walking um, 20 minutes to wherever you work in the city, there's going to be a lot more stops. So even if you are living, Ipswich or on the outskirts, more or less you might have been pushed. You might have lived closer and you wanted to be in the city, as you said. Like some clients, they wanted to live in Brisbane. But that price growth in the last 5 years just meant that it's unaffordable now, and so they've had to move out. Sort of on that 30-40K ring of the city. They can still get into the Brisbane. They'll be able to get to Central, jump on another train line, shoot to underground to where they wherever they're working, whatever building they're at, and be at work within 5 minutes of being in the city. So those sorts of growths are definitely going to help. More specifically, there's been an upgrade to the Warrego Highway, which is out in Toowoomba. So that's again just making transport and direction. There's a lot of industrial area, I should say, for Ipswich as well. Huge these days. Those distribution centres for all the big companies, the Coles, Woolworths, even the Amazons, have massive warehouses out there where all the goods get dropped off, and then when people are doing their online buying, gets delivered from there. So there's a lot of industrial work. There's a lot of job opportunities out at Ipswich as well. So again, it makes it more appealing for workers. You can move out there, have that big house, big lot, and there's going to be job opportunities. So it sort of saves you having to do anything with Brisbane.
100%. And I know that I have my property investor hat on for this episode, but I can't help but think, because I speak to an incredible amount of first home buyers that are trying to get their head around this 5% guarantee deposit scheme, and they're trying to find where they can actually afford a house, and they're looking for what can I afford. And when you say these sorts of things like 600 to 700,000 and all of this sort of ability to be able to commute into the city and a growing town, you'd have to consider that if you're a first home buyer.
Yeah, I think 100%. And even myself, having that investor background, even when I'm buying a principal place residence, I'm always still got that investor hat on the background. My wife hates it, but and so I would say to people that it's great. Ipswich again, and Toowoomba the same. Great locations, good to live there. But even if you think, oh, we're only going to live there 5-10 years, it's going to tick all the boxes for an investment property anyway. So you're going to see great growth in that period. Hopefully, you'll just be able to use the equity and move to a location maybe in 10 years' time that might suit your lifestyle or your family, if that's your plan. But then you can just rent your property out, or if you need to sell, it's going to have that price, that great growth. So it's a double whammy. And obviously the benefit of the tax benefits of being a principal place of residence whilst that price growth is going to happen. But I would. Yeah, I can't see that there's not a lot of negatives to these areas at the moment, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Yeah, Ipswich has a lot more, I suppose, vacant land, but it's just not enough. And then there's not enough builders and construction companies in the area that are going to fill out these areas. Again, I should say, like, flood is obviously a big concern in and around there. So I don't know if we can touch on that a bit later on how we mitigate those sorts of concerns.
Yeah, I think we've got sorts of risks. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, again, it's just, you just got to be smart. You got to know how to mitigate them, but it's not the be all end all, and there's definitely plenty of opportunities to still buy great properties that don't have those huge risk factors.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this episode and you know a young person or a first home buyer, they don't have to be young, that is saying that a house might not be, in their in the realm of possibility for them, there are some places in Queensland that you can still buy a nice home. 30 minutes? Did you say 40 minutes from Brisbane?
Probably 40 minutes, yeah, 40 Ks.
Let's say 45 to Brisbane, which, if anyone who lives in, Victoria or New South Wales wouldn't flinch at that kind of distance. And if, would you say it's becoming more gentrified at Ipswich?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's projected to be the largest growing population growth for that council region over the next 20 years as well. So there's a lot of they're needing a lot of state government money to put in new shopping centres. Just get upgrades to roads. It's really, and the benefit of these newest estates that are getting put in, they do design them quite well these days. They have beautiful parks. Like, you drive through them, they're beautiful areas. They do plan to have, even if it's a smaller shopping centre, you got your Woolworths and your Coles and a couple of specialty stores all nearby. So you don't have to leave. You don't have to drive into your Ipswiches and to go to the major centres just to do your weekly shop. So they do design them quite well, this day and age. And again, I think it is a good point. A lot of people do get frustrated that wherever they live, and you have to spend $1 million, and you just go, how do you even buy a house for $1 million? You need $100,000 in savings, and plus this, your stamp duty or other additional costs maybe on top, and you just go, how do you even save that money with this day and age with the prices of everything growing up? But it is worth considering these options where 500,000, 600,000, or something like that. You might only need to save 50,000 and get your foot in the door, or buy a property. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if it grows, 15, 20% like it has in the last 12 months in some locations, and then automatically you're getting close to an equity for another purchase within 5 years. And again, then that allows you the opportunity to maybe live in a $1 million area.
You might move out there to get that guarantee and then decide you love it and stay.
That's exactly right. That's what most people do.
I know. Now, so I guess jumping back to investors, if you are, tell me about a bit about yield in Ipswich. So if somebody's buying a house and land for say 600,000,
sort of 6 to 7, depending on different suburbs. Yeah.
What kind of rental return are you seeing on the daily?
Look, you're still, so you should still be getting anywhere between the we were sort of bought 4 to 4.5%. So you're looking probably $550 a week rents, give or take, depending on obviously the purchase price. If you're in the 700,000, you might get your 6 to 650. I always sort of recommend looking. Obviously, you want a quality property that doesn't require a lot of maintenance. If you can, it's Queensland at the end of the day. You want something. If it's an investor mindset. You want something. Put in maybe air cons, fans, those sorts of things. They're going to impact your rental yield. They're going to, tenants are going to fight over those properties or be willing to pay slightly more. So, be willing to spend maybe a couple grand on putting some air cons throughout the property because it's too hot up here not to have those sort of luxuries. Vacancy rates again, no matter where you look, they're well under sort of 0.4 to 0.5% in most areas, which it's just crazy. They're going to rent out within a week or two of being on market.
100%. If you live in Ipswich and you're not in the property market yet, get in.
100%.
Now, on the ground, when you're at open homes, so you're at open homes in these areas every day for buyers, and I know you're there on behalf of investors. I was talking to Marcus the other day, and he was talking about regional New South Wales, and he says, there's at opens there's 17 investors for every 3 first home buyers. What are you seeing every day? Just in those sorts of areas, first home buyer to investor ratio, and what are the struggles that people are having?
We're probably slightly more. We're probably closer to 50-50 at the moment, which is good. 12 months ago, we had more owner occs in a lot of these areas, but the investors are coming back in. So it is a bit of a balance. Obviously, investors are very number driven, and so they have their price, and if the property goes over that, they move on. And whereas the owner occ, if they go through it, they love it, they might be willing to pay more because that's going to be their forever home. There's still a lot of there's a hot market in most southeast Queensland, so you're a lot of interest. If it has gone to market, so it's having open homes on markets on realestate.com, and it's good quality property, you're likely going to have 20-30 groups through each open home. So be willing to, you're probably going to be paying on the top end of the price range, which is where I always try and educate my clients is look for those properties that have a bit of potential that might not look the prettiest. They might have tenants in there. I mean, if tenants are in there, great. They might, maybe they're paying slightly under rent because the current seller hasn't been keeping up with market rates. So you might be buying in and say the rental yield is 3.5 or 3.8%. You go, oh, I'm going to have to pay $100 extra out of pocket for the next 4 months until the lease comes up. At the end of the day, that might be an extra $1,000. You're buying a $700,000 home. If you can buy it $20K under what another house is selling because that house is vacant, you'd rather pay $1,000 extra in rental contributions for 4 months. And then when that new lease comes over, you bump it up to the market rent. And then you've gotten yourself a great property and you're getting a 4.5% yield. So be willing to look at alternates, and a property might look dated, so it might be a 70s or 80s build, and so the tiles look a bit dated, or the bench tops don't look great. Um, it doesn't really matter if it's going to be invested as long as there's no damage and they're in it's good quality condition. That's not a huge factor for me. Like I'd be rather going in, trying to get a discount or trying to get a great property rather than spending 30K over because the place has just been fully renovated by the previous seller, and therefore every owner rock that wants to buy something that's finished and they can just move straight into and don't have to touch, they're willing to pay that extra price. So try and be flexible on the condition of the property. I'm not saying buy something that's termite ridden and roof's about to fall in, but cosmetically, I think be open to it. Again, if you can buy something that's potentially has the property location allows maybe again, common thing in Queensland, three bed one bath is very common, which is frustrating because they don't often great yield because there's only one bath and people like to have an ensuite these days and have a second bath for the kids or whatnot. But a lot of properties I see that are built in the 60s, 70s, 80s have a huge laundry. Don't know why, but that was the thing back then of having massive laundry. And you look on the property plans, and the bathroom might be 2.5 by 2.5 square meters, and then you look at the laundry at the other end of the house, the other side of the house, and it might be 3 meters by 3 meters, and you go, that's interesting. Perfect. It's a wet area. It's already waterproofed. It's tiled. It's got plumbing to it. In my head, I'm thinking I can convert that into a bathroom for 15, 20 grand. You could probably do it cheaper depending on the layout of the plumbing. And suddenly, if you've got a three bed two bath, you might have been able to buy this. A 3 bed two bath to a 3 bed one bath. Price difference might be 30, 40, 50K on the market. So you might be getting in cheaper. You have to spend that 15 grand in a few months' time or in a few years' time when you have the ability to do so. But you've added value, plus now you're getting a great rental yield. And so it's just ticking a lot of boxes. So if you can be a bit flexible, I definitely recommend going down that route.
Buy at a discount, add value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think I should say, like a lot of it might sound daunting if you live in other states of having to do a renovation. If you're not even at the property, you don't know. A lot of property managers offer it as a service these days. It might be a slightly additional charge, but it's not hard to get a tiler, a plumber, and maybe a carpenter in to do and get three of them in there, do 3 quotes, pick the quote you like, and then just say yes, 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 and then it gets handled. Like the property managers might charge an additional service for for project managing it, but it might not be a huge cost overall, and so you don't have to be on the ground, in person inspecting it and coordinating it, or someone else does it for you. And so again, it's a worthwhile avenue to go down.
Do you know that I've actually done a renovation on the Sunshine Coast, and my property manager there did the whole thing. He treated it like his own, and he didn't charge me anything. And I can't imagine, I haven't ever seen that from a New South Wales property manager, but it just blew me away how much he did like a project manager for a normal management fee. But that's just something that might be a one-off, but I was really blown away.
I definitely have seen, I definitely have seen property managers do it and not charge a fee at all. But I think now as it becomes more common, they go, I can probably make an extra $1,000 you're charging like a project management fee, and so they add that cost in. But again, in the overall scheme of things, as long as they're not overcharging, it's still worthwhile considering.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we better take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you about some risks and how you mitigate those for your clients.
This is Property is brought to you by Sphere Home Loans. Sphere Home Loans is a mortgage broker that helps our listeners all around Australia. So, if you want to get into your first home sooner, looking at upgrading, an additional property, or want your current mortgage reviewed, just search Sphere Home Loans or click the link in the show notes, and their dedicated brokers will be able to help you wherever you are. If you are, however, after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. If you would like help based on your own personal situation, head over to moneypodcast.com.au, click Get Help, and we'd be happy to introduce you to one of our trusted professionals. That's moneypodcast.com.au and click Get Help.
Welcome back. We are with Luke Aldridge from Envisage Property. He's a buyer's agent on the ground every day and telling us all things Queensland. Now, we talked about a few things. You touched on a few things that might be a little bit specific to Queensland earlier. And I heard you say floods and I heard you say fires. Was it fires?
Yeah, correct. Yep. Yeah, nature. It's a
Tell
lot of
me,
most. Sorry,
yeah,
so
tell me
it's
what you're
mostly.
looking
Sorry.
out for clients when you're buying for them in Queensland specifically, and what some of those risks are.
Yeah, I think again, most of the time when unfortunately Southeast Queensland comes in the news on the sorry, on the national stage, it's for a flood, a big flood event, and so I get again a lot of clients that are concerned. It's their major concern. They Google a town, and the first thing that comes up is a previous flood from a year or two ago, and they go, "Oh, this is ringing alarm bells straight away." And so there's definitely easy ways to mitigate it. Is by up on a hill, but by well out of flood zones. That's a way to definitely mitigate that risk. But I think at the end of the day, we as humans and as population, we love to be close to beaches. We love to be close to rivers, and that brings that risk into play. So we use a couple of different software programs that does give us a bit of a flood overlay of different areas and shows you risk levels. But again, the local councils these days, knowing that it's such a huge factor and it's such a huge risk, they themselves have pretty good mapping systems and interactive maps. So you can just type in an address. You go into the Ipswich Council or the Moreton Bay Council, you go to flood map, type in an address, and it'll show you the risk of that specific address to floods. And it might even show you, did this flood in the huge floods in 2022 or the big ones in 2011 or in 75. Like, it'll go back through history and show you if this property has ever been impacted. And so that's a very helpful tip. I mean, it's an easy way to go and find it if it's never been flooded. And again, there is a slight positive to having these massive floods. For instance, the 2022. I think in some locations it was a 1 in 1,000 year flood, and other locations it was 1 in 400 years, 1 in 100 years. And so, to my mind, like, if it didn't flood, even if it is, and maybe in the software it's saying it's in a flood overlay zone because it's at a certain sea level or it's in a certain proximity to a river or whatnot. If it didn't flood in a 1 in 1,000 year flood, and I'm only projecting to hold this property in the next 30 years because I'm not going to be alive in 1,000 years, my risk level is pretty low that this is at risk of flooding. Still, another quick way of checking the industry that's going to be most risk averse is the insurance companies, because they're the ones that pay out when the flood does occur. And so it's very simple you see a property come up, you don't know if it's going to be in a flood risk, do a quick insurance quote online, put the address in, fill out the 10-minute survey asks, and then look at the premium. It'll shoot out a premium. If the premium is standard, sort of 1,500 to 2.5, around that sort of premium per annum, depending obviously on property price. If you're looking at a multi-million-dollar property, it's going to be a lot more. But you standard, sort of, if it's a couple grand, that's, to them, they're considering it low risk. If it's suddenly 5-6 grand or well above, then for them it's a high risk, and they're considering the high likelihood it's going to flood at some point during this person's occupancy. So it's an easy way to filter through properties. If the insurance company think it's low risk and they're the ones that are paying out on it, then again, we're more comfortable with still purchasing a property in that area. Again, it's having chats with the owners if they've owned it for a long time. Has this place flooded? Have a chat with the agent. You've also got to try and work out that they're selling a property, so they're going to try and make it sound as good as possible. But you can generally tell, there's markers on telegraph poles that say, the history of floods in this area, and you'll be able to see how high it come up to. You look at the property. Does it have, if it's just plaster walls, or if it's got lower level damage in and around skirting boards and stuff, you go, okay, it's probably flooded at some point, and they're trying to hide it or something. So there's definitely ways to mitigate flood concerns. So I don't just rule out areas, because again, most of Moreton Bay proximity to water puts it in a flood overlay, and so you rule out the whole area. But every time it floods, 5,000 houses don't go underwater, so it's not quite accurate.
I can tell you it's certainly not deterring any of those people building those mansions at Newport Marina, is it?
No, exactly right. They're right on the bay there, and the governments have to, when they're approving things these days, and pretty much ever since the 2011s ones was a bit of a kick up the bum for a lot of governments. When they're doing approvals for these areas now, they have to do a lot of risk assessments and working out ways to, where they can allow developments and where they can't, and if they are, they have to be built to a certain. I've seen places that are built on 1 metre slabs of concrete. So the whole estate might be 1 metre raised off the ground. It must have been a huge cost for the developers, but it just puts it well and truly out of flood risk for them. And so again, it's been mitigated before you even buy it.
Now, so do your research on the property, get an insurance quote. If it's in any sort of flood zone, find out how long, get the history. So just really, like you would in any state, be aware of the issues and be informed before you make an offer on the property.
Yeah, correct. Yep. Do your due diligence. And again, it's a similar other risk factors. Fire, but we have bushfires up here. Not as I suppose common as maybe Victoria. Obviously, Victoria and some of those other states have some really bad ones. But again, it's
what's the fire rating called in Queensland? So we would call it a BAL rating. What do you call it?
We use the same one. Yeah. Bushfire alert level, I think it is, and so which again, it's that can be based on proximity to bushlands and all that sort of stuff. Because it's a moist area up here, it's humid. A lot of the growth, it's especially up further north, it's a lot more tropical. So definitely not much bushfire risk up north. But we don't have that real. A lot of time we don't have that real dry brush that can be down in some of the southern states. When fires, and again we try and just design places and this newer states these days are well away from the risky areas. But you got to be you got to be smart as an investor and make sure you're not backing onto bushland. Look if you can look, or if you have a buyer's agent or have someone on the ground, is that bushland being managed? Is it a metre high grass and thick brush all through it that's not being regularly maintained by council? Then it's a high risk. If it's the tree line's good, there's a bushfire break in between it, it's not a huge area, then it's been well maintained and low risk. We obviously have, again, cyclones are a risk further north, a bit more trickier. You can sort of houses get built.
More Cairns?
Cairns, Townsville, some the occasional further south on the coast. Towards your Rockies and stuff, but definitely far north Queensland that's the big risk up there, which puts a lot of people off. But
the crocs?
Sorry,
more than the crocodiles.
Yes, I've spent plenty of time up in these areas, and locals do not care about crocodiles. It's might as well be a fish to them. You see them, it is. It's, they be smart. You can be smart about anything. But they know when to swim in different areas and where, and if it's been flooding, then you don't swim in certain rivers at certain time. You stick to fresh water. You're fresh, to them, freshwater crocs, nothing to worry about because it's smaller and less aggressive. But to the rest of us, it's like, I'll stick to my swimming pool. But for cyclones, again, it's just making sure the buildings structurally sound and they're being built to cyclone ratings. There's ways to mitigate it for sure.
Now, just before, I want to ask you some case studies, and I know that it's been a long episode, but Queensland's such a big place, so I'm glad that we got to deep dive into a few. But before we deep dive into a couple of case studies of purchase, tell me about Queensland. I know because I bought in Queensland, I have clients that buy there. It's a little bit different to everyone else. So just for the benefit of anyone who isn't in Queensland, hasn't bought there before, what are the differences in the process from Queensland to other states?
Yeah, we do things that tend to be a little bit backwards sometimes, and it is confusing and a bit concerning for interstate buyers when they get put in the position. So, for instance, a lot of the time when you're putting offers in to purchase a property, the agent will actually get you to fill out the offer on a contract. And so before you've even done any negotiation, there might be multiple buyers. They're putting in offers as well. They'll put every offer on a contract, and that contract gets presented to the seller. And so, which is strange. You are signing the contract as an offer getting put towards them. So they could literally sign it, and then you bought the property straight away. And so, again, it seems strange. The theory behind it for agents, I suppose, is to try and weed out non-serious buyers, the buyers that go along and put out 10, 15 offers, on different properties throughout a weekend, just trying to secure something. And then all of a sudden, maybe Saturday afternoon or Monday morning after all the opens, the agents are calling around and saying, "Oh, congratulations, you've secured the property." And I've accepted another one. And so it's stuff around for the agents. And so, but if you've put an offer on a contract and you've done that a few times, and suddenly the sellers have signed multiple contracts, you're in a bit of a sticky position.
But it's normal to do it there. It's normal,
to do.
Tell me, when I sign that contract, though, am I in a conditional contract? Do I have a cooling off period? I've signed this. I put this offer in with 5 other buyers. If I'm the successful buyer, what's my out if I change my mind?
Yeah, so there's a 5-day cooling off period in the buyer's favour, which is standard in every Queensland contract, unless it's going to auction. I know in other states sometimes that cooling off period can be a bit of a negotiation tool, and so it gets withdrawn to make your offer look a bit favoured. Typically in Queensland, that's not the case. It's always in there. So you have 5 days from the contract getting signed by the seller that you can bail. The risk is, to that, there is a 0.25% penalty to the buyer if you do so. So it might be a couple grand. So there is still that risk. So I wouldn't suggest putting in an offer on a property you're sort of 50-50. If you're not serious, at the price you're at to buy that property and the agent's asking to put on contract, don't put it forward. You will, if you're using building and pest clauses and finance clauses, there are other avenues, but the property comes back and the building and pest report's great and your finances are great, you're committing. But again, at the end of the day, you want to buy that property. So I don't try and get clients people putting offers on being 50-50.
Yeah, so if it would deter me. So I think, and if they want serious buyers, that's a good way to do it. But if I put in an offer and I'm accepted and the place is full of termites, or my finance doesn't get approved for some reason, can I get out without the 0.25?
Yes, correct. Yep. So if you have your building and pest clause and your finance clause, which I would always recommend doing, even if your finance is solid and even if potentially they've done their own building and pest or you think the property is great, I'd still recommend putting that clause in. Yes, you get, if there's an issue identified in either of those avenues, you can pull out and you get 100% refund of any deposit paid. There's no penalty, and so that's your safeguard there. So don't be pressured. I do see a lot of agents trying to pressure buyers, and sometimes I'm sitting there at an open, I'm seeing agents pressure them saying, "Oh, your offer's not going to look that great if you've got a building and pest clause or if it's got a finance clause." So be it. Especially if you're an investor, you're there for the numbers. You're there to make sure the property's right. You don't want to be stuck in a position.
I don't think it's backward at all. I actually think that's as someone who's just probably doesn't have a lot of experience in that sounds like a really good system. Because if you're in New South Wales and you buy a property and you go into a cool-off period, you get a pest report done and the place was full of concrete cancer, you don't get your 0.25 back, even if the vendor was well aware of that. So I guess at least that 5-day cool-off, a little bit weird at the start when you're doing that, but the upside is finance doesn't come through or there's something wrong with the pest and build, you've got an out without a cost.
Yeah, and I think a lot of buyers do stress out when they're suddenly signing a contract and they want a conveyancer to review it. And it's not that common for conveyancers to review contracts before they get signed by both parties in Queensland, which is it's an unusual process, because a lot of the times the open home will be on a Saturday morning. You put your offer in, and by Saturday afternoon, if you've been successful, the agent will send a contract to your DocuSign. They'll say, "Yep, if you can sign it by this afternoon," the seller will sign it, and then it's done. Obviously, no conveyances are open on a Saturday afternoon, so those contracts don't get reviewed till Monday. Again, that's the argument is there's the cooling off period and clauses. But again, our contracts are pretty straightforward. They're more or less a checkbox of you put in the property, you put in the offer details, and then it's just tick boxes of what's applicable for this property. There's only 2 real areas that's certain additives can be added by the agent or by the seller that might get you caught out, and it's very straightforward to see those conditions get added. So it's not hard. It's not a tricky thing to read through the contract and go, actually, what is this? This is a weird clause. I'm not comfortable in signing this. Whereas if those sort of sections are left blank, it's not a very complicated contract to review. And I would even suggest, if you are still a bit nervous, before you are going out and buying properties, contact a conveyancer, get them to run through a draft contract with you and show you what to look out for. And so when you see a contract put in front of you, exactly what to check, and so you're comfortable signing it without it getting reviewed by the conveyancer first. And then, again, once it's signed, you shoot it straight through your conveyancer. They review it first thing Monday morning, and I'll let you know of any issues if there were any.
Yeah, I think that is a really good tip, and I actually think if you're buying in Queensland, that's something you need to know before you even enter the state about, because that's a huge difference to some of the other states.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, I know that we've gone over, so I hope that you've got time to still share some case studies with me, but I just wanted you to share, I know Queensland's a big place, but a couple of case studies of what's happened in the last few years for a couple of clients for you, and what they've bought and what they bought it for and what's happened in the last few years for them.
Yeah, correct. Would you like the addresses as well of these places?
You can just give me towns if you don't want to give addresses.
Yeah.
Or addresses, I'm easy.
I probably should have had a chat to clients before I start giving addresses. So I'll give you.
Maybe just
I'll just give you the data.
A little bit about the
property.
Of
course. So, for instance, we've done a lot of buying. For example, in Toowoomba over the last few years because it did tick a lot of boxes. It's an affordable price. I've got one purchased in April 2023. So not even that long ago, only 2 years ago, $477,000 for this property. Brick low set. Yeah, low set brick, 4-bed, 2-bath, in one of the premium suburbs, Rangeville. It's known of Toowoomba, so it's more of a premium area. And this, so in 2 years, it's now valued over 700,000 is the online valuation for this. So, in 2 years, it's gone up considerably. And I think that, honestly, if that property come on the market right now for 700,000, I'd consider buying it myself. Even for myself, that's a low valuation. It's incredible, and so that one would be renting as well at the moment for about $650 a week per rent. So if they would have gone into it, their mortgage probably was around $400,000, and they're getting $650 a week rent. They're sitting back very happy that purchase.
Has that gone up at that time? Was it a more modest rent when they bought it? And
it was still, even back then, from memory, the rent was 4.75, I think. So it was pretty close to 5%. It was 4.5% to 5% yield even back then.
Again, but that's still a big rent increase in 2 years.
Yeah, I suppose that's what happens with the price grosses, and people want to live in these areas. They're willing to pay more. But Queensland's always been quite well off rental yield wise. I know other states don't quite. I'm not quite sure what the deciding factor is there. I know there's definitely still plenty of demand in say Victoria, but we do definitely get great yields up here for rent. Great outcome for that client.
That's a great regional story, because a lot of people, when they think regional, don't think of that kind of growth.
No, exactly right. And I mean, if you're getting into a property at 400 or 500,000, it's it's a very achievable budget for a lot of people that are trying to get their first property. And all of a sudden, you've made a couple $100,000 in 2 years, and so now you're considering, where's my second purchase going to be? Because I've got the ability to do so. I've got for instance, another one, same suburb, bought 3 years ago. This was $650, so it was a premium property at the time. Great location as well. That's worth $870,000 now. So again, it's another 250 or slightly more growth in that time. That property is renting $750 a week. So still fantastic yields.
There's still a lot of infrastructure to come in that area. So from what you're saying, there's still a lot of growth potential, and there's going to be a lot more people moving there.
Yeah, these clients are purchasing premium property, premium areas. There's a lot more money coming into it from the governments. It's just going to continue growing, and the population is exploding. So it ticks all the boxes for an investor. I've got another example here. This is in a suburb of, it's called Bundamba, so it's more Ipswich area. It's a satellite.
Is it Bundamba?
Bundamba, yeah. So and most people haven't. It's kind of it's actually closer. It's on the east side of Ipswich, closer to Brisbane. So slightly more promising. I bought it in 2021 for a client for $420,000. Again, low set brick, 4-bed, 2-bath. Barely had to spend anything on it. It was pretty much set and forget rental. Val at the moment is $790,000. Great result for them. They've got a great property there, and I think the rent was $650 from memory last time I saw it. For their mortgage, I think it was about $350,000, back then, and they're getting $650 a week rent. So great result for those guys.
Yeah, great. That's I bet those clients are very happy with that property.
I hope so. Yeah, I can't do much better than that, I think.
You can't do much better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't take all the credit. It's a great, the numbers are there and the capital growth is doing all the work for us. But definitely identifying the right areas and buying good quality properties. That's what investors need to do.
Yeah, amazing. Now, I've got a couple of quick fire questions for you. If you had $600,000 to invest today in a property in Queensland, where would you buy?
Oh, great question. 600,000 Gympie, I would think.
Gympie?
Yeah, I like Gympie. So that's northern end of Sunshine Coast.
What about $1 million?
If I had $1 million, probably I'd actually go Gold Coast, somewhere on the Gold Coast if I could. There's probably a few locations that come to mind, but yeah, Gold Coast.
Biggest tip for a first-time investor buying in Queensland?
Flexible on locations. So, as in, have a few suburbs you're looking at, or like a town, and be flexible on where you can buy in that town. Especially in hot markets, don't if you're looking at one suburb because you've seen the data on that one suburb, or you've seen again someone talk about one suburb, and you just look there, you'll be spending 6 to 12 months searching, and with prices growing 10 to 15% in that period, you'll miss out quickly. So be flexible in location, and as soon as you find something that ticks a lot of boxes, go for it and buy it, because being in the market and getting that growth on the way up is better than watching it go past.
100%. Last one. What do you love most about living in Queensland?
The weather. Has to be the weather. Yeah, I mean, it's sunny right now. It's sunny in 25 outside. It's pretty good all year round, and then there's a few months a bit of rain and stuff over summer. It gets a bit hot, and I mean, we get 1 week of winter a year, so it's hard to go past the weather. We spend most of the times at beaches, and it's a great lifestyle.
An endless summer is my absolute dream. I cannot wait to be able to incorporate that into my life.
Great place to retire.
You have been so very generous with your time and knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing all of that information with us, Luke.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you know anybody who's looking at buying in Queensland, please share this episode with them. I think it just had so many great tips, and especially if somebody hasn't bought in Queensland before. Also share it with a first home buyer. Again, thanks for letting us come into your ears. You're listening to This is Property. My name is Rachelle Kroon, and I'll see you next week.
Any information given in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and you should seek your own property advice before acting on anything you may hear in this podcast. If you want to start or advance your property education journey, John Pidgeon's book, Sort Your Property Out and Build Your Future, is available where all good books are sold, or via the link in the podcast show notes. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs and not those of the hosts, the publisher, or their respective license holders.